Okay. Hey, I'm Shelby Sawyer. I'm a third semester master's student in the Ecogeomorphology and Topographic Analysis Lab, and I work with Dr. Joe Wheaton. And today I'll be talking to you about reimagining riverscapes and the undersold potential of our valley bottoms. So we rely on the ecosystem services that riverscapes provide. I can say personally, I love being in rivers. I spend probably too much of my free time casting flies at fish that are not always interested. But I guess I have a personal connection and reason for wanting to understand rivers through research. I think the important thing, though, is that we all need rivers. We rely on them for drinking water, agriculture, recreation, industry, so many other things. And so it benefits us all when we understand them better. We know that riverscapes worldwide are threatened by anthropogenic pressures, and that a lot of these impacts are being compounded by climate change. So it's kind of crazy because we rely on rivers to live. They're essential to our survival, and yet they're the most threatened ecosystem worldwide. And so when it comes to solving a problem this big, I think you kind of have to step back and ask what's there already. And so I think, managers need a reliable way to visualize and quantify landscape potential over large scales. And so we need to understand where the valley bottom is across the landscape that we know. And the valley bottom includes the active channel, the active floodplain, and the inactive floodplain. And together we just define this as the maximum extent that could flood in the contemporary flow regime. So we also know that healthy rivers that are managed to allow for flooding and fluvial adjustment provide resilience to fires, droughts, climate change, and flooding. So we've gotten pretty good at mapping this important part of the landscape locally. The problem is that when we try to scale it up, it gets pretty expensive. So whether we're doing in-person, out in the field mapping of floodplains, or desktop processing methods, or we're running a hydraulic model for a specific return interval flood, like the 100-year flood in this map here, it all is really expensive between time and funding. And so we're getting to this need where we need to be able to scale it up and do it for less money. So a couple years ago, a USU student, Jordan Gilbert, developed the first iteration of the valley bottom extraction tool, which we call VBET. And this worked pretty well because we could scale it up to the Huck scale. We weren't working at reaches anymore. But it did require proprietary GIS licensing. And when I first started working for the lab, I opened this up in ARC, and you had to, of course, spend half your day pulling in all these inputs that you need, and then maybe take a cry break when ARC crashed on you, because we know that happens. But ultimately, there were just all these points in the process where you're spending a lot of your time and potentially not even ending up with a product that you're happy with. And so we kind of define this as a research grade tool, and this is where my work comes in. So my role with my master's work is to elevate this research grade tool up to what we call a production grade tool. And this means that we can run it on massive extents, like 2/3 of the US, and it's not going to require interaction on the user's part. So I hope you're wondering how this tool works, because we're about to go through it in a lot of detail. It requires two inputs. They're both freely available national data sets. So the first is the 10-meter digital elevation model, or the DEM. And from this, we use Dr. David Tarbotton, who is also at USU. We use his TAUDEM tool to extract 3 terrain rasters that help us understand what's going on the landscape. So the first of those is slope. And this just gives us an indication. Sometimes a change in slope is a great way to kind of pluck out where the valley bottom is ending. The next is height above nearest drainage, or hand. And you can kind of think of this as like a bathtub model for us to look at. It's just giving us an idea anywhere on the landscape, how far above that nearest drainage cell are we? and then topographic wetness index, which I'm not going to try to explain because it still confuses me a little bit. But essentially what it tells us is it gives us an approximation of how close we are to the water table anywhere across the landscape. So these different terrain rasters get housed in a TAUDEM project, which we host in the Riverscapes warehouse. And then with the National Hydrography Dataset, or NHD, we're plucking out the geometry of not only water bodies, but also the estimated banksful width of the channel network. So we're bringing this all into one vector file, and then we're rasterizing it, and we're housing that in a channel area project. So at the end of this, we have these 4 rasters that we call VBET evidence rasters. And in short, what they do is help VBET decide for anywhere on the landscape that we have a DEM and the NHD, where's the valley bottom, or how likely is it that a given cell is a valley bottom. And once we decided on these evidence rasters, then we had to figure out how the heck we were going to use them. And this required taking about 5,000 observations of valley bottom. And we did this across like diverse catchments all across the nation, and multiple users contributed to this. And so we're using a random 90% sample from this database to specify the transform functions. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky, and I'll try to be as clear as possible. This figure is something that I made up, so please be nice to it. We are hoping that when I actually do run this, we just got the data in like early this week. So it's all kind of happening right now. But it'll look something like this, where we see hand, slope, and TWI really looking different across small, medium, and large catchments within the watershed. So this figure up here kind of shows how we go about splitting that watershed out. So for each segment in the channel network, there's a stream order associated with it. And we associate a drainage wing with the stream order, and then we break that out into small, medium, and large. And that's just because we're going to expect to see different valley bottom behavior as far as the evidence goes, based on what part of the watershed we're in. Like, for example, up in Spawn Creek, you'd expect to see much steeper valley bottom or much steeper values within the valley bottom than like if you were down at Cutler Reservoir, you'd see very low slope values. So we're trying to just split those out and make sure that we're applying the evidence properly. So when I first learned about this and learned about transform functions, I thought they were magical, but I'll try to demystify them a little bit, and maybe they're not as mysterious for everybody else. But essentially what they do is take the evidence raster cell values and turn them into a likelihood value from 0 to 1. So if you can imagine that this little grid that I've made is a slope raster within a medium catchment inside a watershed. And then maybe you've got this 45-degree slope cell. VBET is going to identify the proper transform function to apply to that. So 45 over here, and then it will assign a 50% likelihood to that. So then we get these normalized evidence rasters that just have those likelihoods in every cell. And then we have these 4 normalized evidence rasters that we can work with to average and create the likelihood of valley bottom, which is kind of our end output. And this, I mean, in itself, I think is pretty powerful. Being able to visualize your riverscape in this way, in a continuous way across the landscape, at least for me, has really changed how I understand things. But we can also pull out at different parts, the active channel, the active floodplain, and the inactive floodplain. And so we can go about pulling out these in a vector form, and from there you can quantify. This is another made up figure that I'm hoping will soon look exactly like this, ideally. So this is what we're doing with the other 10%, a random 10% of that 5,000 point database. So we'll go back with our continuous likelihood raster, and we'll select those points that we took and pull out the likelihood of valley bottom value and what we categorized it as when we took that observation. And we're hoping they look the same. And if not, then we'll know we need to go back to the drawing board and work on some calibration. And so I think as far as applications go, there are so many, there'd be too many to try to explain today. But essentially, VBET helps us answer some pretty fundamental questions about riverscapes across our nation. And it helps us answer them at a scale that we haven't been able to do before. So for example, maybe a manager would want to know what's the proportion of active channel to inactive floodplain for perennial streams in the state of Montana. That's just like a click away now, which has never been able to be done before. And these projects are all available in the Huck 8 format in the Riverscapes warehouse. So if you have a web connection, you can just open them up and explore them right there. All you need is internet. And but if you're curious and you want to dig more, you can download them and explore them in ArcMap or QGIS. I had to put this in because seriously, you only need a internet connection to like explore all of this crazy stuff around you. And I think it's a really great resource for managers and different stakeholders from all different levels to be able to access this. And I guess I just want to end with kind of bringing home this point that like these are undersold and underimagined valley bottoms. And this is where, oh, I guess I'm done. Okay. What did you say? That's good enough. Okay. All right, well, basically at the end anyway, and they obviously don't think critical natural infrastructure is as important as I do. But I just wanted to say thank you so much to my lab members and for my advisor, Joe, who's helped me along the way with so many things, and Matt and Philip from North Arrow Research, who are data wizards and have done all of the backend coding for this to make it run really smoothly. And lastly, for Bureau of Land Management funding to make this project happen. And I'll take some questions.
The last slide, but this is telling us what are floodplains that are really right now in the face of all of the changes that we've made in watersheds, or is it telling us
it's more expressing potential, I think. As far as like, if a manager was wondering like, what's the potential that's in the riverscapes that I'm managing? And they're seeing like, wow, I have a lot of inactive floodplain that could be connected at some point. It's a metric to try to quantify that and understand that on a big scale.
Do you see anyone using this for like a geohazard flood? Because I mean, yeah, a lot of like flood maps haven't been updated in a very long time.
Yeah. At the point that it's at now, I don't necessarily see it being used for that. I think I see it more being used for managers, but I don't see why they couldn't be used like in partnership. Sorry.
I can barely even see myself. So this is really interesting and great presentation. Are you doing validation on some of this stuff? I'm thinking about active and inactive floodplain. Using a 10-meter DEM, it's pretty,
yeah.
It's going to be hard to pull out the nuances of that. And then also what you think the potential is, you know, with USGS updating the NED data set, LIDAR data, getting better topographic resolution, if that will change the outputs of your analysis, in the future.
Yeah, this has been a huge topic of discussion for us. Just so because of the scale we're running it at, which is 2/3 of the US, we just did it with a 10-meter DEM for sanity's sake, but it can be run with LiDAR. We've tested it and it works really well with LiDAR. So that's promising, I think. But yeah, it is tricky. Like some of these channels, when you only have a resolution of 10 meters, it can be a little tricky, but I think it's like a known issue. So.
Do you have any plans? Do you think that you could create some index between active channel from your tool versus inactive floodplain? Try to correlate that with some metric of flow alteration across all of these rivers. It's like to kind of make your point related to David's question about the potential loss of what we currently have.
I guess I'm not quite sure what you mean by index, but
I'm just thinking your tool right now shows kind of conditions as they are as far as the active channel.
right, yeah,
And then the inactive floodplain maybe reflects historical conditions.
right.
So there's probably data for a lot of these river systems on flow alteration that's out there.
Yeah,
The ratio.
I think you could. We don't have plans to do that right now, but I think that would be cool if we have time to do that. Because again, like it is just expressing that potential that's out there. So that's the most important part for us. Okay.